Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Vietnam business briefing on seizing opportunities in fintech and e-commerce in Vietnam. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. My name is Danielle Rajendram, and I'm the Associate Director of Advisory and Insights at Asialink Business. Before we begin tonight's proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and also extend that to the custodians of the lands that you are all joining us from. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. Just a few items of housekeeping before we begin. We are very excited to have so many of you joining us online and would welcome any questions that you have for the panelists. You'll be able to type them into the Q&A box on your screens, and we'll do our best to get to them as we proceed through the panel discussion. Today's session will also be recorded and available on demand following the conclusion of the event. As many of you may already be aware, tonight's event is an initiative of the Australia-Vietnam Policy Institute. The AVPI is Australia's first policy institute which focuses on our relationship with Vietnam and is a partnered platform for bilateral engagement, discussion and collaboration supported by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. At Asialink, our mission is to increase Australia's engagement with Asia through our programs in the arts, business, diplomacy and education, and we are very excited to be one of the founding partners of the Australia-Vietnam Policy Institute and to host this event for the Institute tonight. Tonight, we are here to talk about some of the really exciting opportunities for Australian businesses in Vietnam's burgeoning e-commerce and fintech landscape. Vietnam is home to one of Southeast Asia's most active innovation ecosystems and has emerged as a real hub for fintech innovation, with the number of fintech startups tripling in the last 5 years. The e-commerce landscape in Vietnam is similarly booming and is expected to become the fastest growing e-commerce market in Southeast Asia in the next 5 years as well. The growth of these sectors and Vietnam's digital economy more broadly presents a range of opportunities for Australian businesses, including startups, and we're really excited to have an incredible lineup of speakers here with us tonight to discuss these opportunities. We're going to begin the event with some opening remarks from Martin Bean, CBE, and then we'll be joined by our expert panelists, Tim Aman, Phillip and Sandra Tran. But first, I would like to welcome Martin Bean, CBE. Martin is the CEO of the Bean Centre, a Vietnam business champion and former Vice-Chancellor of RMIT University. Thanks very much, Martin.
Thank you, Danny, and hello, everybody. It's great to have you here with us for tonight's brilliant conversation. And of course, as we just heard, it's all about focusing on seizing opportunities in fintech and e-commerce. For those of you that may not be aware, the AVPI, which is the acronym we use, is a partnered public policy hub dedicated to advancing the Australia-Vietnam strategic and economic bilateral relationship. And I'm just so thrilled to be part of that initiative. I'm here tonight as someone deeply committed to the Australia-Vietnam relationship, which I proudly helped progress during my time as Vice-Chancellor of RMIT University. RMIT celebrated its 20th anniversary in Vietnam last year. Our on-the-ground presence in Vietnam represents Australia's largest investment in Vietnam, with nearly 10,000 students and 700 staff and campuses across Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi and Da Nang. I recently had the pleasure of being acknowledged as one of 3 business champions alongside Rob Gordon, the Chief Executive Officer of Sunrise, and Louise Adams, Chief Operating Officer of Oricon. We 3 have been working together to identify the best ways to foster a collaborative ecosystem of strategic two-way engagement between Australia and Vietnam. Our plan is to run a number of focused face-to-face business roundtables in capital cities across Australia to develop the framework and content to support a high-powered trade delegation to Vietnam later in the year. Vietnam is one of the most dynamic and exciting countries in our region. It has the fastest growing middle class in Southeast Asia, a COVID-resilient GDP growth currently at 2.9%, as it was, I should say, in 2020, and a young population that readily embraces new technology. Australia's business and government-to-government relationships also continue to go from strength to strength. We have a strong mutually beneficial interests in boosting two-way trade and investment, supporting economic growth in both countries, underpinned by the Australia-Vietnam Strategic Partnership and accompanying plan of action. The progress on the Australia-Vietnam Enhanced Economic Engagement Strategy, which aims to put Australia and Vietnam on a path to becoming top 10 trading partners in the very near future, is also a testament to the relationship. Vietnam's digital economy is a significant part of this growth story and a driver of opportunities for Australian businesses in Vietnam. In 2020, despite the challenges of COVID-19, Vietnam's digital economy grew by 16%. The government of Vietnam is committed to digital transformation and has established a working group of key stakeholders to advise on a regulatory fintech sandbox and an accompanying pilot program. This regulatory sandbox aims to provide greater certainty for local and foreign players navigating the sector and is expected to come into effect later this year. The government actively promotes a non-cash payment society with the goal of increasing the cashless payment to over 50% by 2025. The fintech opportunities in Vietnam continue to be in digital banking, payments, blockchain, cryptography, and cybersecurity. Strong inflows of venture capital have allowed local startups such as Momo to compete with the likes of Grab and Sea. Fintech innovation is redefining banking, insurance, and other financial services via e-wallets, as well as an array of mobile payments and a growing ecosystem of back-end technologies. The e-commerce market in Vietnam is also forecast to grow at an annual rate of 30% between 21 and 25. The most popular e-commerce products in Vietnam are clothes, personal care products, consumer electronics, and household appliances, and key platforms include Shopee, Tiki, Lazada, and Sendo. It's really quite an incredible and exciting moment to be discussing these formative shifts that are happening in Vietnam and the opportunities for Australian and Vietnamese business people to make an impact, work collaboratively, and improve inclusion, diversity, and access to the digital economy. So it's my pleasure now to hand back to Danny, who is going to be moderating this wonderful group of speakers that we have this evening, or whatever time zone you're in. And I just want to thank you all for allowing me to welcome you. And I'm looking forward to the conversation very much. Back to you, Danny.
Thanks very much, Martin, and thanks for those insights. It's great to hear from someone with so much experience and passion for the market. So thank you for that. I'd now like to move into our panel discussion and introduce our three wonderful panelists. We are very excited to be joined by Tim Aman, who is Partner of Audit and Assurance at BDO, Sandra Tran, who is a Director of Vietnam Trade and Investment at Global Victoria, and Phillip, who is a co-founder of Homebase. I'd like to give each panelist the opportunity to briefly introduce themselves and provide a bit of background on your organisation and engagement with the Vietnam market. Let's start first with Tim.
Thanks, Danny. Nice to be here. That was a great introduction by Martin, and you know, it reminds me of my time in Vietnam. I work for BDO, which is a global accounting firm. We're the fifth biggest firm globally. You know, I spent 5 years on the ground in Vietnam back in 2007 to 2012. And so, you know, I like to spend a lot of time talking to Australian businesses in terms of having opportunities to go back to a place that I think is a fantastic place for companies to work and grow. So, you know, what we spend a lot of time, what I do as well is I'm the global leader for Fintech for BDO. And I talk to a lot of Fintechs globally about different opportunities in terms of countries to go to. And specifically over the past month, spending a lot of time talking to companies that might be exploring opportunities in Vietnam. So I'm happy to provide some insights about my time there and what I think about the Fintech market.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Tim. It'd be great to hear from you next, Sandra.
Hi everyone. Thanks for fantastic guest to have me here. Thanks for Asia team. Thanks for inviting me to join as a panelist. Hi everyone. Good afternoon from Vietnam. Thanks for making time for the webinar. My name is Sandra. Currently, I'm serving Victorian government. I have about 10 years experience in e-commerce and development with previously Metrocast and Carry, Frontera and L'Oreal. It's a great pleasure for me to serve Victorian government and then to support the growth and go-to-market in Vietnam. It's nice to meet you all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandra. And I'll just hand over to you now, Phillip.
Fantastic. It doesn't look like I'm able to drive the slides, so I might need some help on it. But that being said, great to meet everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me here as one of the panelist members. Really honored to be here among such esteemed company. As Danielle mentioned, my name is Phillip. I'm currently the co-founder of a company called Homebase, and we're an innovative kind of real estate technology company and startup based in Vietnam, originally from Singapore. My previous background extended across financial services, from investment banking to consulting to venture capital, and happy to kind of provide some perspectives about the digital economy here in Vietnam and the startup ecosystem. I think in regards to some of the slides, as Martin mentioned, Vietnam's growth is really astounding in the past several years. And I think one of the best industries is the ones that we play in. So, real estate actually as an industry is something that really epitomizes this growth. There's really astounding statistics that we see in our industry. For example, home prices have been increasing 20% year on year. I know in Australia, things are getting very expensive, but in Vietnam, growth is even faster. And part of this is that because the regulatory framework for a lot of these traditional industries is still changing. So for example, for foreign ownership of real estate, that's been something that's enabled in the past 10 years or so. Sorry, do you mind going to the next slide? And if you look at kind of the opportunities at play because of all of these tectonic changes in the regulatory framework, in the financial underpinnings of the economy, that's where a lot of the opportunities that we see come into play. So the financing market in real estate, for example, is one of those really new things, so that not a lot of people use traditional options. And even despite COVID, because of the tremendous growth, we see actually a lot of growth in the economy. So that's actually where Homebase, we actually add a lot of value. Sorry, do you mind going to the next slide? So as mentioned, Homebase is one of Southeast Asia's kind of fastest growing real estate companies. And what we really do here in Vietnam is we focus on providing accessible financial options to owning property and real estate to foreigners. Currently in Vietnam, we partner with very leading developers and real estate agencies. And I think it's a really great testament in our personal experience to see how incredible the fast growing the economy is. Because in the past 3 years, we've been able to assemble a team of over 70 people. And we recently were fortunate enough to announce a 30 million fundraising round across a lot of different venture capital firms across the world. And at Homebase, as a brief introduction to what we sell, we provide a full suite of kind of comprehensive financial infrastructure for real estate investment into Vietnam. So for people who are interested in buying or investing in the country, we provide an alternative to mortgage financing. For people who are interested in selling the property, we actually will buy property from them instantly. And then we also provide other services that allow you to do further due diligence on the property. Investing in the emerging market is sometimes very scary, and other operational value add. And then I think, sorry, do you mind going to the next slide? And I think the great thing about Vietnam is that there's so many opportunities to play across the entire spectrum. So at Homebase, we've been able to expand from a very small company to actually serving clients across every single property type, across every single location in every single city in a short amount of time. And because there's so many foreign interests, especially from Australian clients and other overseas clients, we've been able to work across the entire spectrum, across international profiles of our clients as well. So that's it. That's a little bit more about Homebase and what we do. If you guys are interested, feel free to check out our website or ping me personally. But very excited to the panel and see what I can contribute.
Thanks very much, everyone, for that great introduction to what you do. It seems like we're going to have a fascinating discussion with lots of depth of experience in terms of the Vietnam market and a lot of variety in terms of everyone's focus. So, thank you very much for that. We might jump into our panel discussion now, and first I'll start with a question for Tim. For those of us and for those in the audience who might not be quite as familiar with the sector, what are some of the major growth segments in fintech in Vietnam, and what are some of the areas of fintech in Vietnam that might still be in their infancy?
Thanks, Danny. And I think Martin highlighted a few of the key points that are really growing quite quickly back in Vietnam. And for those listeners that are from Australia or have been watching the fintech market here, fintech really took off in that sort of payment sector, and globally that's the phenomenon in terms of you're seeing a lot of developing countries go from an unbanked society, an underbanked society, to a digital economy and banking system. So the payment subsector within Vietnam is really fast growing, and you're starting to see a lot of super apps come in where banks will provide multiple services, and that e-commerce, which is a trend that sort of started really and picked up globally around COVID, and has been picked up by the Vietnamese people. And probably it's there's been some talk a little bit about again, when I was in Vietnam, it was a very entrepreneurial country in terms of people would uptake technology very quickly. So you can definitely see where fintechs have a great opportunity there. In terms of, if someone looks at sort of a market map of the fintechs in Vietnam, it's a bit of a microcosm or ecosystem of what we're seeing here in Australia. Australia maybe has 400 to 500 fintechs. Vietnam is 120 to 140-ish, sort of fintechs, and a lot of the same sort of subsectors. Probably ones that are starting to develop would be things around insurtech. Insurance isn't necessarily a big product traditionally in Vietnam, and that's starting to pick up. And Phillip, you kind of alluded to sort of real estate, and so that's starting to really pick up in terms of some of the changes that are happening in terms of ownership rules. Probably one area that's a little bit different is probably around the crypto space. In terms of the crypto has been sort of banned by the Vietnamese sort of government. Back in 2017, they made a ruling, and they're working on a framework. A lot of countries are working on frameworks, but that's a subsector that's probably been a bit hindered in terms of development, but they've got a lot of skill sets that can help people develop outside of Vietnam. So there's definitely skills and technology that's there on the ground. I would probably say another area that you're starting to see is, that buy now, pay later phenomenon that happened here in Australia. You're starting to see here in Australia, there's a bit of a saturation in the market for buy now, pay later. I probably predict in some of the fintech subsectors, you'll start to see consolidation, although they're probably, the triple the size of the Australian population. So it's going to be interesting to see how many fintechs and subsectors can sort of survive. But I think they'll probably adapt pretty quick and consolidate and be a bit more agile than probably what we saw in Australia.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that overview, and thank you for outlining some of the complementarities between the existing fintech sector in Australia and in Vietnam as well. I might throw to Phillip next, who's obviously very familiar with the startup scene in Vietnam. Phillip, what are some of the characteristics and drivers that you see in Vietnam's startup scene and digital economy, and how can you see this differing from other parts of Southeast Asia?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Danielle. I think, as Tim and Martin provided really great insights, I think actually Vietnam is very special because it's actually coming at a very unique time in its country's development, not only from its development as an economy, but also its geopolitical development, where it's almost coming to the world stage as one of the more preeminent economies in Southeast Asia. So I do think that actually a lot of the core fundamental startup drivers or ecosystems or trends that we see actually follow some of these more core macroeconomic trends. And as Martin alluded to some of these, in Vietnam, there's a growing sense of emerging middle class. I think Boston Consulting Group did a study where by 2030 there will be almost 30 million new people in the middle class, right? And part of that is basically they want consumption, they want drivers, they want to buy real estate, they want fashion, they want brands, they want, you know, fintech, they want easier solutions to live, to work, to play. And, you know, there's other trends that Vietnam is also very, very special in. And for example, you know, mobile usage and digital solutions are actually very high in Vietnam compared to other parts of the world. And so I think that's actually where a lot of the startup ecosystem is being driven because of all of these macroeconomic changes that are going on. And I do think that, you know, Vietnam is quite unique in its kind of effect of all of these changes, just because even if you compare it to some of the other Southeast Asia countries, Vietnam's growth and its kind of position of emergence is actually very unique. Even if you compare it to neighboring countries like Thailand, where there's historically been a lot of growth, but since then has really plateaued. But Vietnam is actually still on this very, you know, kind of exciting trajectory, especially in the next several years, in the next decade, where there's still a lot of opportunity here to be had. And so I do think that, you know, Vietnam is quite kind of unique in that. And, you know, just from my own, you know, personal experience, for example, one of the core sectors that we play in you know, at Homebase is actually in real estate. And if you just look at some of the core problems that exist or the core solutions that exist, a lot of the fundamental infrastructure is missing here. So, you know, when you talk about consumer financing, as Martin said, you know, a lot of the people here are unbanked. So it's almost impossible for them to be able to get mortgages or traditional financing. And these are solutions that, you know, you would take for granted in a country like Australia or in the US or Singapore. So there does seem to be a lot of opportunities that are arising from these macroeconomic changes. And I think these opportunities will only accelerate in the future as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for outlining that, Phillip. And I think some of those macroeconomic trends, as well as the demographic trends that you've outlined, also play into the growth of the e-commerce market in Southeast Asia. And I just wanted to throw to Sandra on that one in particular. So Vietnam's expected to become one of the fastest growing e-commerce markets in Southeast Asia. How can Australian businesses capitalise on this growth to reach Vietnamese consumers?
Thank you, Danielle, for your questions. As I think that is Phillip mentioned a while ago, digitize, and, you know, all of like high technology. And as you know, Vietnam is a very young population country. So I think that people very welcome high technology, high products. So I think that you are Australian, we have the advantage is that in the top of mind, all of like reliable, high quality, and then very safety on of the product, like the quality Australian offer is always in the top of mind of the customer. I think as a Martin, like, you know, with the opening remarks that, you know what, the education's one of the highest destination. And then so, you know, I think that is young people right now, they searching it, and the top of mind is always where to study in Australia. It's the only top of mind, baby product, consumer products, and also like health supplements and all kinds of the high quality and baby care. But it comes to e-commerce, that's it, like, you know, it's easy and also interesting market, attractive in Southeast Asia. I can say in the past 10 years when I developed e-commerce business, Vietnam is always the hotspot for e-commerce to grow. But it, like, you know, to jump in the market, to jump in e-commerce, it's not an easy question, is most of business answer. So you have to really understand the market, how your industry, how your sector, how your products, and then what the consumer needs. And the demand is the most important thing you need to think of. Like, you know, some category we can sell offline very well, but some category when you get into e-commerce, is it a whole and a really long process? So you have to understand very well where your consumer, they are on traditional channel or they are really hunting the products online. And then you choose, well, where's the platform where you will be on, and then where's your partner on. I think that is like one of the basics and core criteria you need to really be aware of if you are thinking of, and then to approach the attractions of Vietnamese consumer.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that, Sandra. That's some really interesting insights on how to understand the consumers and how to appeal to the Vietnamese market. I might just ask a question of Tim next, which is just around how Australian businesses are looking to engage with Vietnam in the fintech sector. Is Vietnam on the radar for Australian fintech companies? And if not, what changes do you think need to be made, or what messages need to be communicated to get Australian businesses really excited about the opportunity in Vietnam?
Yeah, it's a good question, Danny. And I think, obviously one of the good things is sessions like this. I think when I work with a lot of Australian sort of fintechs or global fintechs that come here first as a landing pad in Australia, and then they might look to extend into Asia. They sometimes don't naturally think about going to Vietnam. And so I think partly is just raising the awareness of the ecosystem that's there and sort of the government plans to support digital transformation. And I think Phillip sort of alluded to is, probably Vietnam is on the precipice of really taking its stage on, from a global perspective. When I was there was probably thoughts that was going to happen, just before the global financial crisis, and then global financial crisis happened. And I think it's taken a bit of time to come up to that, that current stage where Vietnam is. So I think raising awareness. I also think when I talk to, a lot of the fintechs here, they're probably looking to see, they're trying to get their operations settled here. And so they're probably just starting to get to the stage of a maturity where they can start to think to extend to Asia. So when I talk to companies, I always talk about Vietnam, not surprisingly, because I'm a big fan of Vietnam. But I also think that the demographics are there, and I think if you can get some regulatory stability and you can get some government stability in terms of the rules, I think you'll attract more Vietnamese. You'll attract a lot more fintechs wanting to go to Vietnam. But I think that's always a bit of a challenge. And I think if there's people that have spent time in Vietnam before, like when I was there during the GFC, you had a lot of Australian companies that were looking to explore coming up to Vietnam. At that time, they were investing in traditional insurance companies or securities companies or banks. This is a little bit different because you can be a lot more agile. And so I think that's gonna eventually attract more fintechs that want to go up there.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think those policy settings that you've outlined provide a really interesting basis for continued engagement with the economy. So thank you for that. Just following on the theme of external interest in the Vietnamese economy, Phillip, just a question for you. Based on your observations of the digital economy and the growth in the digital economy in Vietnam, what are some of the emerging trends that are really attracting investors to Vietnam at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think when we think about kind of trends and investor interest, usually we see generally two types of categories of interest, right, and of trends. One category being very Vietnam specific things or emerging market specific things, and another being more established business models or trends that we see in more developed economies like Australia that are just now coming into Vietnam. So, for example, in the first bucket, right, it could be something like in real estate what we are doing at Homebase, which is basically because there's a lack of a traditional financial infrastructure for banking, a lot of people cannot qualify for mortgages. So in that case, it's very hard for people to buy a home, right? And that's something that is a very Vietnam-specific issue or Vietnam-specific problem. Maybe you see this in other fields like e-commerce, right, where Shopee or a lot of the other Singapore companies have really dominated the market because traditionally there hasn't been maybe good distribution of e-commerce goods, or even in fintech, right, where maybe payments are a little bit difficult. So recent years there's been a lot of e-wallets and mobile wallets that have really emerged. So you'll see a lot of these trends basically that are very Vietnam specific, and that's a factor of where the country is and where the country is headed, and some of the traditional kind of infrastructure, missing pieces of infrastructure that the country faces, where startups or new companies are trying to innovate and improve in that space. But I also think that there's a really big opportunity for more, traditional models or more established models that have been proven in other parts of the world, including Australia and the United States, that have now just come into Vietnam. So, some examples of these are like the buy now, pay later companies, which I think are very, very popular, very big across Australia, across Europe. But in Vietnam, it's several years later because of maybe it takes time for people to adapt. And I think, in those spaces where investors or where more experienced operators can really contribute value is that, operating experience where they've seen these companies being built across other parts of the world, like Australia, and they have that knowledgeable experience and knowledgeable expertise here in Vietnam. Whereas in the first sector, where it's more Vietnam-specific issues or problems that people are trying to solve, it's a little bit more about local nuances of the market and being able to really adapt solutions or customize unique solutions that work well for this part of the market. So I do think that across the entire spectrum there are a lot of different opportunities, but I think high level those are the general categories that I would think about.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Phillip. And I think what you've highlighted there in your remarks is also quite a lot of complementarity between the fintech and the e-commerce sectors, particularly around that buy now, pay later and other options that you have outlined. I just wanted to ask Sandra a question on that, actually, around how fintech can be used to better engage customers on e-commerce platforms in Vietnam.
All right. Thank you for your question, Danny. I think that, right now, fintech is one of the most important. If you want to get your consumer, it's like become a dead benefit. As the other panelists is also mentioned, like e-wallets is one of the trend in Vietnam. So people is like crazy hunting for the exclusive benefits like offer, pricing, Momo, Mocha, Yellow Pay, Viettel Pay, those kind of like every time we shop on Lazada or Tiki or Sandra or Shopee, on of when before we go to the checkout, it's always pop up promotion, pop ups the pricing when we enter the code. So when you think that, this become the benefits for your consumer or online shopper, you should thinking of that, which is the best, which is the most convenient. How can your consumer, because as Vietnamese consumer, they always like something good, fast and cheap. So 3 points you always need to remember when you enter market: cheap, fast, and good. So everything like, how to go, don't offer too much like, okay, 50% off, and then you offer the code, and then your consumer cannot enter and apply to that. So they will not come back to you for the next time. So make sure that, which are your partners, how are their platform, how to make your consumer too easy to understand your promotions. And like, don't offer the benefits is something unreliable. It's like the cheating. Because Vietnamese consumer right now, they are very, as the growth of technology, smartphone, everyone needs the smartphone. So the consumer is wiser, more intelligent. They have more options to choose. They have more time, what to look for, whatever they need. And, when you just Google, they can see the pricings of one product in different 4 platforms already. So make sure that, when you choose your partner, and the time frame to apply for your program. And then fintech, I think, is one of the right idea right now. Like most of the e-wallet is very, very easy to use. You just have the apps, on your cell phone, and then your smartphone, you can easy to do. Because then also the Crow and then the partnership with the banking right now, like it's very easy to interact like the system from e-wallet and also the banking, e-banking. So I think this is provide exclusive, offers and benefit and more options for our consumer. It's just like you have to take the advantage and then leverage the good opportunity. How to bring that fintech is become actual benefits for your shoppers.
Yeah, fantastic, Sandra. And I think those we've talked a bit about consumer trends and some of the demographic shifts that are happening in Vietnam that are really prompting a lot of growth in the e-commerce and the fintech sector. Tim, based on your work that you're doing in Vietnam, what can some of the demographic and consumer trends tell us about emerging opportunities for Australian businesses in particular?
Yeah, I think Sandra covered a lot of that, very, very well. I was having palpitations flashing back to my time in Vietnam in terms of dealing with the Vietnamese, because they drive a very hard bargain. I think, you know, in Sandra sort of highlighted it. I mean, I think one of the issues in terms of trends is how do you have brand loyalty? And this was the same issue 12 years ago as it is now. You know, you've got a young generation, and if we look at any young generation in any country, you know, there's not, you know, brand loyalty is one of the challenges that every company is sort of facing. So, and I think in Vietnam, that's a real issue. I think, you know, clearly with the smartphone penetration, the highest in Southeast Asia, that gives fintechs the opportunities to access the market. It's just how do you keep your customers happy and reoccurring? So I think it's going to be interesting to see as fintechs evolve from that payments is to other services. So Phil sort of alluded to the real estate market, something that's a bit more sticky. If you look at things like wealth tech, or if you look at insurtech, some of these things are going to be probably a bit more sticky than payments. I think payments are going to be quite agile, and people are going to move around quite a bit depending on what it is. It's almost like collecting, you know, credit cards, or collecting, you know, frequent flyers with multiple different airlines. So it's going to be whipping out what's most valuable there. So I think it's a matter of coming to market with a good product. I think one of the things to think about is kind of what does the Australian fintech stand for? And so I think the partnering becomes quite important. Financial literacy is becoming, you know, one of the key drivers for the Vietnamese government. There's a lot of Australian fintechs that, you know, are working with the Australian population about financial literacy. I think that's going to be more of a plug and play if you can lift and shift some of that thinking and partner with the right people on the ground there.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Tim. I think that's a really good prompt to kind of take the discussion towards some of the really practical steps that businesses can take. I might throw back to Sandra and just ask, what are some of the practical steps that businesses should look to take when they're seeking to establish themselves on Vietnamese e-commerce platforms?
All right, thank you, Danielle. That's an interesting one. So when you go here, I think that 3 points you always have to remember. What's your products? How is the trend in your industry? Second one, who is your partner and which platform you need to get in? And the third one, who is your and what is your competitors are doing? So like normally you have to choose, I think the most important one is the platform. We can say in Vietnam or e-commerce, we can say e-retailer. As I think Martin mentioned a while ago, Lazada, Tiki, Sandra, and Shopee. So you have to know that is how is your product play in which platform, and you have to learn by heart the demographics, the target consumer of each platform, because you know, if you don't know very well the target and demographic of each platform, I'm sure that you're not able to be successful, you know what, to get in on e-commerce, because you know each platform, they quite different character of the customer database, different habit, different willingness, and different like the spend amount also. So in e-commerce, that is one of the tricky one. Like Tiki is like younger one, Lazada one's like more premium one, and even like Shopee like the boss of that. But you have to know that is which have the well branding in the market, like who are the best customer service, who are the best pricing, and who will be easy for your operation also. And then the partners in Vietnam, when you're thinking of like you get in, first of all, in the logistic and supply chain part, you have to know that is who are your assistant. It means like we can, I can share like e-commerce enabler or e-distributor or e-customer and e-commerce operation services. So because getting e-commerce here quite very complicated in Vietnam, you should choose the right partner, you should choose the right assistant how to get your business on, because you know, relate to logistic delivery supply chains, why are very hard to control. I can give you some example, Like customer very great, like, you know, they go and choose some infant formula products, and then on Shopee, the pricing is very, very good. And then they click and then to buy, check in and pay. But and then later on, the delivery service is coming so late. Okay. And then the consumer, they cancel the order. You know, that is make your sale. It's like zero sale for your business. So you have to choose is where is your platform, and then who is your partner, and what is your consumer needs in each platform. And then the thirdly, it will be your competition. What are they doing? So what they want to compete with you in terms of pricing, exclusive benefits or offer, or the customer loyalty. So in Vietnam, e-commerce, like as I know, because the consumer, they expect everything, but it's always need to good and cheap. So if they're like, you know, the pricing and e-commerce right now, we also have competing with hand carry category and also official store. Okay, so on those kind of like the products on official store, it's always guaranteed. That's it, the branding. They will offer like a huge like promotion, best price, customer loyalty. But you know, you have to really determine is where your products come from, especially on e-commerce, because currently so far there's no official like regulations, you know, how to really protect the business on those kind of platform. We just have like authorized, because you know, if you can choose the right partner, the right distributor, you will have like, you know, someone will control for you. That's it, your store will be under authorized store. So if someone compete with you in terms of the fake product, in terms of like, you know, any something wrong, the bad quality, you can have the right to go and to work with the platform. So you have to know that says in the competition right now, most of the big brands in Vietnam in the consumer goods category, they doing crazily, you know, pricing, promotion, FOC, all of kind of things. So also you have to understand where your competition, where your competitor, and the digital strategy. Because you know, anything like you want to set up your store and then later on you don't have the digital marketing strategy, you know, all of the whole process is going to fail. Because you know, maintain on the business law for traditional channel, you just put your product on shelves and then the retailer will run for you, Big C, Coop Mart, and then Sandra Food, and then will run for you. But on e-commerce, you have to run by yourself. So you have to really choose the right partner, e-retailer, e-distributor, and e-commerce enabler, how to manage your digital marketing strategy, your operation, your warehouse, and then the delivery service to end consumer. I think that's it. Many things, you know, what I share, but it's really so basic. And then some metrics you need to take note very carefully.
Yeah, fantastic, Sandra. I think that's such a comprehensive view of all of the moving parts that need to go into a market entry strategy, and how important doing your research and really understanding the consumer and the market really deeply can contribute to your success. It's been such a comprehensive view of some of those practical considerations, but I just wanted to open it up to either Tim or Phillip as well, in case there was anything further that you wanted to add in terms of the practical considerations around entering the Vietnam market that some of our audience might find useful.
Who wants to go first? Maybe I have to say a few quick comments. I think partnerships is really, really important. You know, and what I like really about doing business in Vietnam is it's a bit of a throwback to how I like to do business. It's relationship building. So it's you find good relationships on the ground in Vietnam. You work with them on your strategy, and you build trust. And I think that's the best recipe to be successful on the ground in another market. And I think one of the challenges when you're coming into Vietnam is you have to work with the right people, you know. And so again, you know, you see lots of, you know, and this isn't just Vietnam, when people try to expand overseas, if you work with the wrong partner, you're doomed for failure. So just trying to make sure you're doing some research there. And you need to have a few people on the ground that you can trust, that can steer you in the right direction. The other part would be understanding the government and regulatory landscape, just making sure that you've got people that can help you navigate through that, either, you know, the lawyers or people that are close with the State Bank of Vietnam or Ministry of Finance in terms of licensing, et cetera. So get the corporate structure correct, get the right advisors, and be committed, I guess would be the other part is, you know, it's, you've got to be committed to stay there for a while. You know, if I look at Martin, you know, I was there when RMIT was, you know, I knew some of the first people that went through the program there that have been there for 20 years. You know, we've seen a lot of the Australian companies kind of come into Asia, they leave Asia. They come into Asia, they leave Asia. And obviously the Asian markets remember that. So I think if you're going to go in there, you need a bit of a longer term strategy that you're committed to Vietnam.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being able to demonstrate that commitment is a really, really common theme across a lot of the markets that we work across. Phillip, is there anything further that you wanted to add in terms of the practical considerations of entering the Vietnam market?
I actually think that Sandra and Tim did a really good job in covering it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I might ask you a different question. No, that's great. We've had a very comprehensive discussion on that. So I might actually ask you a different question, Phillip, just around the startup ecosystem in Vietnam again. And just based on your observations and your experience, what can some Australian VCs learn from other countries on how to successfully engage with Vietnamese startups?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think the overall sentiment, and you know, it's very exciting, is that the VC ecosystem and the startup fundraising ecosystem in Vietnam is still, you know, in its very infancy. It's in its very early stage, and I think more and more now you have very global funds from across the world, from India, from Singapore, from Korea, Japan, investing into Vietnamese startups. So actually, capital is becoming more of a commodity of a resource. So I think that being said, there's probably like three main general topics or things that I would say. Number one is, I think, you know, despite the country's fast growth and a lot of startups coming into fruition, one of the things that, you know, people and entrepreneurs that I know, especially in this part of the world, crave is actually professional experience or professional experience like scaling startups or building companies from the ground up. And I think, you know, as a VC, as an investor, the job is actually not only to invest money in a company, but also to advise the entrepreneur on how to operate and how to steer your company in the right direction. And I think especially as Australian VCs start investing more and more in the region, I think that, you know, a lot of that experience, maybe investing in other countries in Southeast Asia, but also within Australia and building companies, could really help entrepreneurs here and demonstrating that value add instead of just being a check, right? Because money is a commodity. Demonstrating that value add could really be helpful. I think the second thing in not only Vietnam, but also Southeast Asia is that while in Vietnam, there's a lot more, I would say, early stage funds. So, you know, in startup land, we call them like seed funds or Series A funds, but the later stage check sizes of Series B, C, D are still a little bit lacking in Vietnam because, you know, of its kind of status as an emerging economy. So, you know, the bigger check size of institutional investors usually are a little bit more risk averse. So I think, you know, as, you know, Australian VCs and investors start investing in this region, usually the check sizes will start increasing, and, you know, maybe that's something of a risk kind of thing that they have to think through. And then I think the last thing is that there are a lot of other, you know, countries that have started investing in Vietnam. I think one, you know, really, really great example is Singapore, where, you know, the government even has some programs that incentivize entrepreneurs to set up there. So they'll give incentives, or there'll be programming for them to, you know, actually visit the country and you know, see how other startups are being built. So I think as Australian VCs and, you know, the Australian government starts considering some of these programs to cultivate and encourage entrepreneurship, I think there's a lot of regional examples that we can actually leverage and, you know, see how we can grow in those fields as well.
Thank you for all of those insights. I think that, yeah, the providing examples of countries across the region that are doing it really well provides a really great template for Australia and for investors to be able to look at what is happening across the region. So thank you for that. We have got the Q&A box open and would love to hear from anybody who might have questions for our panel. We've definitely got some time to work through some of those questions, so we'd love to hear from you. We have received a few questions in advance, however, and so what I might do, I might just run through some of those and throw it open to the panel to answer to whomever has a particular interest or has some particular expertise on those areas. One of the questions that we did receive from our audience prior to the event was just around what the inherent risks of exporting to Vietnam are. So things around legal protection, logistics reliability, or payment systems, and whether there is anything that businesses should keep in mind as they do start their export journey to Vietnam. Maybe Tim, is there anything that you'd like to add on that particular question?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's probably not my area of expertise in terms of protection, but again, I do think it's getting the right partners on the ground. And I think any sorts of deals that you're signing, making sure lawyers are having a look at that. So, when I was there, there was a lot of, it was probably more Korean, Japanese, Singaporean companies that were coming into the import-export zones that were being set up by Vietnam. So there's a well-trodden path, in terms of, import-export. A lot of the port cities are set up for that. So it's probably just making sure you're doing your research, making sure you're getting the best sort of tax situation, because some of the rules are quite advantageous to try to get investments to particular provinces. So again, it's probably taking a step back and talking to people to see where you want to go into. Obviously, there was still that strategy of, the China +1 in Vietnam was the +1 in terms of, from a supply chain perspective is, minimizing risk in terms of supply chain. So I think, one thing that we've seen with COVID is obviously supply chain interruptions. So I think companies starting to think, even if you're looking at having an alternative market, exploring Vietnam, I think would be good. So you don't get stuck with having, one supply chain.
So I just want to add in some point from Tim as he shared that they like the right partner and the supply chains will be the most importance when you thinking enter Vietnam market. Who are like the audience from you? If you are Victorian's company, I'm more than happy to provide more of micro and detail section with you, because that's one of the functions of Victorian government. We help and support Victorian exporters. If you are interested and keen on Vietnam market, as any, you have to connect and then connect with the distributor. If you are the consumer products, you get the right partner or the services like importing services. Because of the procurement on the legal come to Vietnam is a big complex in Vietnam. If your categories in alcohol and mainly drinks, health supplements is why a bit can say classify in the sensitive categories. It will be applied in different level of tax for each category. So like more than happy to provide more of like details if you need anything related to legal regulations, product registrations, and so any services to provide to have the general view, like you can plan for a business plan if you want to expand in Vietnam market.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandra. It's great to know that there's that support available for Australian businesses that are really interested in the market. Phillip, was there anything further you wanted to add there? If not, there's actually a question that's come through directly for you on the Q&A. So I'll let you answer the first one, and then I'll pose the second one to you as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I see the Q&A question is, do you want to read that or do you want me to just directly answer?
Yeah, I can run through that. So we've received a question from the audience in our Q&A. So thank you very much for sending that through. Just noting that you have mentioned some of the differences between Vietnam and other Southeast Asian economies, including Thailand, and whether there's any more detail you'd be able to provide on how you see that difference, particularly between Vietnam and China as well.
Yeah, I think it's actually, I think a lot of people, especially investors, when they categorize Southeast Asia, they think about it as like a region of 600 million people, and it's quite exciting as all. But definitely every single country has its, very unique nuances. One example that we mentioned is Thailand, right? And if you look at the structure of Thailand's economy, its infrastructure, if it's various industries, it's actually quite developed and quite mature as a market. Even the fundamental financial kind of interest rates there are very, very low compared to somewhere like Vietnam or even somewhere like Indonesia. Or, for example, if you take Vietnam and compare it to somewhere like Singapore, structurally it's also very, very different. I would actually say that it's interesting that you brought up China, because I would say that Vietnam is actually probably most close in terms of where it is in terms of its economy, in terms of China. And there is going to be a little bit of a gap. So a lot of people say that maybe Vietnam is the next China, but maybe 10 years back or 15 years back. And we're beginning to see a lot of that kind of manifest in its GDP growth. So if you look at the past, like maybe 5 or 10 years, Vietnam's GDP growth before COVID consistently has been around 6 to 7%, right? And it's almost exactly what we saw in China in 2005 to 2010 period. So very, very kind of exciting, kind of area of growth. And then if you even look at some of the regulation around taxes, around corporate law, a lot of it is actually quite similar to the Chinese economy as well. I would say that, the benefit of operating Vietnam compared to China is that actually Vietnam, in our experience so far, is actually quite open, especially to foreign investment. So, Vietnam is kind of at this nexus where, because of China's COVID policy and some of the more macroeconomic things, it's getting a lot of investment from not only countries that it's allied with, but also around the world, right? So I think it's quite exciting, basically, from an economic perspective as well. I do think that it really depends on the specific sector or industry that you're interested in. Obviously, Vietnam regulations and Chinese regulations versus Thai regulations are always going to be quite different. So I would do a little bit more research on that. But in terms of its position in history from a very high level 1,000-foot view, I do think it's quite comparable to where China was maybe 10 years ago.
Fantastic, thank you, Phillip. I might actually, there's been another question come through on the chat that might be a bit of a deeper dive into the Vietnamese economy that I might throw to you as well. Is just a member of the audience has just asked whether there are any regional differences within Vietnam around government support for foreign businesses. So whether certain parts of Vietnam have more foreign business friendly policies than others, and whether there might be more opportunities for investors across Vietnam in different regions.
Awesome. This is also for me, right?
Yeah.
Really great question. I think a really tough one to answer, just because I think it really depends on the business itself. From my own experience, currently I'm based in Ho Chi Minh City, which is the biggest city in Vietnam. But it's also the city that drives around 1/3 of the GDP of Vietnam, because there's a lot of commercial enterprises here. Versus if, for example, in certain other cities, like in the central part of Vietnam, there's a lot of tourism because the beaches there are really beautiful, and there's a lot of hotels and operators and resorts being built up. Versus if you go to this city called like Dak Lak, where there's a lot of coffee, and more agricultural or fruit products that are going on there. So I do think that it really depends on kind of the specific industry or the specific product that you want to manufacture or bring here to Vietnam. But I think as a high level, general level, like usually, people view, and especially foreign investors, people view Ho Chi Minh City and Saigon as the most exciting kind of nexus for economic growth. And even within Vietnam, a lot of people from other cities do migrate here because they view this as kind of the economic center of the kind of the country, right? I would actually, if you had some more research or if you had more time, I would kind of consider the industries that you're diving into. I do know that a lot of the other cities and a lot of the other provinces, the regional and local governments have various tax incentives being set up. So, for example, even within Ho Chi Minh City, there's one city outside called like Bin Yung, where there's a lot of industrial parks or manufacturing, and a lot of these local governments will have subsidies and tax benefits for specific manufacturers to set up their factories there, so that they can encourage investment. So it would be a little bit more localized like that. And the good thing is that these are really well known and they try to really publish it. So I would dig into those as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's a great overview. Thank you for that, Phillip. A couple of other questions have come through both before the event and while we have been speaking. So thank you very much for those of you who have contributed questions. One of the questions that has come through is also just around whether geopolitical concerns and geopolitical risk across the region has affected any investment into Vietnam. Sandra or Tim or Phillip yourself, if there's anything that you wanted to add on that particular question, please feel free to jump in. I might throw to Sandra first if there's anything there that you wanted to add.
Hi, Danny. I lost you for a while. Can you repeat the questions? Or I can see on the Q&A.
No, this one actually came through prior to the event. So it was just a question around whether there has been any impact on investment in Vietnam due to current geopolitical concerns in the region and geopolitical tensions in the region.
Oh, I think in my opinion, Vietnam very, very much welcome. Like, every month you will see that, from Vietnam and Australia, we sign on off like many agreements that is welcome, like welcome more export, welcome more investment, and welcome to the country. Like we just opened, I think, the last 2 months ago, that is we signed the agreement, like support and then decreasing the tax and then zero tariff for the wine, for instance. This is one of the current one. In terms of investment for the company, just as like high-tech, technology, education, and Victorian government, we already help and then establish like Daisy School and then Swinburne and then those kind of like, especially I know that like from RMIT, this is the right partner. As you know, that is most of the school, university, importers, and then companies is like really interesting market. And I know that from between the relationship from Vietnam and Australia for investment is why can say very safe. It's not like affected in terms of political issues. Nothing I can say. For Vietnam is considered very well, peaceful and very safe. We don't have like the Vietnam government quite very, very careful. Any movement or any step they take relay and then affect to the investment fund, from like from abroad and then from foreign countries and then foreign investor to Vietnam.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandra. Tim or Phillip, was there anything further you wanted to add on that?
Phillip, you can go if you want first.
Sure. Yeah. I do agree with Sandra. I think overall, if you look at the Vietnam government and the stance of Vietnam as a country, it's to actually increase foreign investment, right? And fundamentally, what that means is not only just attracting money, but also decreasing the amount of perceived risk that investors may have. So I think that the encouraging thing is that is the general attitude for the country and for the government, and that's one of the goals, right? In order to develop the economy. If I'm just looking at and again, this is a very big and very tough question that you probably need a political scientist to answer. But if I'm looking at kind of the real estate investment sector, or if I'm looking at stuff like venture capital or money pouring into startups, I would actually say that despite some of the more more kind of geopolitical movements, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, or even some of the economic crises that we're seeing in the West right now, it's actually still pretty resilient. And the really interesting thing that we sometimes even see is that because of the political instability maybe in other parts of the world, like Eastern Europe, or for example, a lot of what happened in China is because of COVID restrictions. People aren't able to manufacture goods anymore. So actually, a lot of that money that is being pulled out and a lot of that investment actually lands in Vietnam. I do remember that immediately after some of the COVID restrictions lifted, some really big companies, especially from Korea or Japan, announced that they were moving a lot of their manufacturing to Vietnam from China because of the ease of doing business here and because of kind of the government's attitudes. So at least in kind of my very limited experience in some of those sectors, I would say that the past like 1 or 2 years, the geopolitical movements really haven't affected significantly that much some of the factors that we're looking into, and that's but obviously it's a very tough question to answer in the future as well.
Yeah, thank you, Phillip. Tim.
Yeah, I think, I wouldn't say geopolitical forces would be a reason not to invest in Vietnam, because I think, Southeast Asia has always has a complex history, and, some of the neighbors don't always get along, and that's just been the history of Southeast Asia. So I think those fundamentals are still there. And I think that the bigger issue is probably, again, not so much a geopolitical, is when you come on the ground in Vietnam, who are you partnering with, and are you navigating the regulatory environment? To me, that's probably the concern that people should be really focused on. Because I think it's just a matter of putting yourself in a position where you're probably not over-investing and you're kind of building up a strategy, and getting comfortable with the partnership would make a lot of sense.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, everyone. I think we are almost out of time in terms of our panel discussion, but I just wanted to give each of the panelists an opportunity just to provide one last piece of advice to Australian businesses that might be interested in entering the Vietnam market. So if there's anything that you'd really like to reiterate for our audience, who I know are very engaged and very interested in the market, that would be great to hear from each of you. So I might start with you, Sandra.
Yeah, hi Danielle. I hope that everyone will, take some notes that, anything and then basic criteria that on the panelists. From my side, I think that, I saw some pop-up questions like you want to establish distribution, what think about like, market, like any products, any manufactured product. Just want to share with you, like Vietnam, very, very open. It's also in terms of distribution channel, you have to really classify and determine where's your product, because in Vietnam, in terms of channel, we'll have like consumer good, we will have B2B, B2C, and C2C. Okay, so you have to know that's where your products is, which channel will be matching with your product. For instance, I can get one of example for food. So for like the milk or whipping cream, you have to define that who are your consumer. Okay, your consumer is retail, B2B or B2C. If you want to get in touch with like on the B2B and bakeries customer, you have to get in touch with the B2B distributor. Okay, so when you just want to focus and aim to attract and get all of your retail customer, so you have to know and then interact with the retail distributor who really specialize in this, in like each channel, because you have to know that Vietnam quite very big. As you know, our population is a great number, and also like the country and then the state and also the city. So most of the interesting and then for business attraction will be in Ho Chi Minh as a main financial center, and also the other like business centers is quite well for financial enterprises, and then company for investment will be in Hanoi. is my point of view. I think that Phillip and then Tim can share more your opinions. But you have to know that this is where you want to grow, which city you want to grow, which partner, which channels, and when you want to grow your products. So you can be have a well plan for your business expansion. Because if you don't know, like you just want to sell coffee, you just want to sell bakery ingredients, you just want to sell food, you just want to sell milk. But the thing is that if you don't have a good and researching and then connections like about Vietnam, you should like some like overview and also like have the market research. I guess this is from Kanta Nelson. They provide one of the very basic and good market research. They update every quarter on their website, available on the website. You can have a look. Yeah, so any like Victorian business, feel free to contact me. You know what, more than happy to provide and then any assistance from Victorian government. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandra. Phillip, is there anything, any parting words of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience before we close this evening?
Yeah, I think Sandra did a very comprehensive, suggestion. So I definitely agree with those as well. But I think, if you just look at, I think Vietnam as a macroeconomic landscape, I think it's actually quite rare, and in the history of the world almost, where there's emerging economies that are just coming into fruition, like where Vietnam is right now. And I think a lot of that is really massive opportunity across the entire industry, across all the sectors that you guys are interested in, right? But obviously, for any high growth economy, a lot of the core infrastructure maybe is not set in place. So as Tim mentioned, it's definitely going to be about finding the right partners. It's definitely going to be about understanding the local regulations, and working with the government and making sure that everything is kind of tight, right? And I think because of its really massive opportunity for growth, I think any business can be successful here, but just have to be very cognizant of the local nuances of doing business and have a certain kind of appetite for that as well. But yeah, I think overall, very exciting economy and very exciting opportunity. And, I would definitely encourage everyone to at least consider or definitely look at Vietnam as a place to do business.
Fantastic. Thank you, Phillip. And Tim, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Probably just a few closing comments. I think, we talked about getting the right partners, get the right people, for the Australian companies that are looking to expand into Vietnam, have good discussions with the local Australian Vietnamese community here, try to get people on the ground in Vietnam, I think is an important part. Stay the course. Once you commit to it, have a plan that you're going to stay committed to it. I think you've got to embrace the culture and chaos, and I think anyone who's been on the streets of Hanoi almost getting run over by motorbikes, you have to understand you're going into a different environment, and you need to be able to thrive in that sort of chaos and be engaged in the process. I think that's really, you've got to really be involved in the process and work with your people and your partners. And the last thing is have fun, have fun on the journey, because it's a great market to get into.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's a great note to close on, Tim. And I think you'll all agree it's been just a fascinating discussion today with some really practical insights and some really, really great insights on what is a really fascinating and exciting economy. So thank you very much to all of today's speakers. So Martin Bean, CBE, Tim Aman, Phillip An, and Sandra Tran today. Thank you very much. And thank you also to the Australia-Vietnam Policy Institute. Just to note that this will be the first in a series of AVPI policy roundtables throughout the year. The next of this will be on sustainable development in Australia and Vietnam, and it will be hosted by the Australia-Vietnam Leadership Dialogue on Wednesday, 20th of July. So if you are interested in attending any subsequent events, this next one is open to the public. Please visit the AVPI website for more details. Before we do sign off tonight, I'd like to just encourage you to take a few minutes to complete a survey that will be circulated to all of you on your screens or later via email. It's a great opportunity for us to be able to learn from your experiences to continually improve our events. So thank you very much to everybody who's joined us here this evening, and thank you to our wonderful panelists and speakers, and enjoy the rest of your night.